Good afternoon, everybody. This is Fair Housing, It's the Law. I am Michael Smith, and this is...
I'm MJ Borelli, and we're both with the Fair Housing Council of Central California. And we deal with all kinds of housing matters and housing discrimination complaints where people like listeners out there call us with complaints about wrongdoing by landlords and discriminatory behavior that's based upon either a person's race, color, national origin, religion, gender, disability, family status, which is about folks that have kids still at home. I think probably one of the issues of the day, considering most of us out there or here are either paying rent or paying a mortgage. You're paying to live somewhere. You're paying to have a roof over your head. And it seems like that becomes more expensive with every passing day. And we at the Fair Housing Council of Central California started seeing some rather revolting developments beginning around 2020. Many of you will remember this was the peak period of the pandemic and closures in states like California where we are. Closures of offices and people not being able to go to work because of lockdowns, etc., etc. And, we believed for a long time that trouble was brewing out there in rental land especially. And probably we're going to be talking about rental stuff more on this broadcast. And we can continue on with another broadcast about gouging of home buying products such as single-family homes, people looking to buy a place to live. But one of the things that we saw, especially, I would say the first part of 2021 and forward, were these incredible rent increases. Now, during this lockdown period, our agency was still investigating trends and looking at what pricing was happening out in the open markets there for rents and for home sales. And we had made, we saw something pretty stunning. We had seen an increase in less than 1 year of more than 30% in terms of how much it costs just to rent a place to live. So those folks that were living comfortably in a two-bedroom apartment in the $750 to $850 a month range suddenly saw their rents going up, or if they were looking for a new place to live, almost double. But at those times, we were seeing
Or double.
Yeah, they have doubled by now. We're more than 40% into it, and this is 2024. And I wasn't sure why is this happening. Did the real estate market and the rental management business, the housing provider business, were they just trying to make up for lost time because there were so many losses with people unable to pay their rents during the period 2020, 21, and 22. There were all kinds of government programs that were created at that time. American Rescue Plan, all kinds of rescue plans that were designed to pay that money back to landlords and owners and property groups that were not collecting rent, that had this real decrease in their yearly rent receipts. So, we sort of thought, well, they're getting even. Somebody's going to slow this business down. Mike and I have discovered kind of a new thing that we didn't understand what was happening. And this was just kind of by chance, and we began to investigate further. And this is a real monster. Today's program is called Rent Gouging and Algorithms. And so what we discovered was there were companies out there that we're really in the business to design these types of algorithms by creating software that could actually change the face of the rental market and change what the going rate was and the market prices. Now, we've talked about affordable housing and what that means, what it should mean on the face of that phrase. Affordable housing is housing that you can afford. But as many renters that we talk to over the years, affordable housing is not always so affordable. Affordable housing is pretty much becoming a kind of a government jargon term that makes the government who's using this jargon term sound like they're, empathetic to those of us out there struggling just to get through the month. Fran Lebowitz, a great satirist out of New York City, says that you spend 100% of your time in New York City just trying to figure out how to pay the rent for the month. And that's surely what's happening to us today. So we discovered a company called RealPage Incorporated. And what does RealPage do?
RealPage, they create the algorithm.
They create the algorithms that sort of change the real kinds of things that go on that should create what the going rate is in terms of rent. I mean, we do live in a free capitalist society, right? But unfortunately, there are those who, especially it seems to be in the housing industry, that stay up until all hours of the night, burning the midnight oil to figure out how to gouge those tenants and home seekers. Hate to say it, but it seems to be the case, and this is especially rampant when we're talking about market prices in the rental housing market. It seems like that ought to be a real-time result from stuff that's really going on. I mean, remember, the driving force of a free capitalist society is supply and demand. But what's happening here, or this company, RealPage Incorporated, there's sort of a consulting group that investors, corporate landlords, corporate property management companies, for example, they engage these guys to figure out how to maximize bigger and better profits. And of course, the whole housing market is about, I mean, certainly this is a business. People are there to make money. We're in a free capitalist society, so that's pretty far out. That's what you're supposed to do, is make money in that kind of an environment. And when you're talking about sort of an unfair competition and price gouging and creating false scenarios that change the face of that rental market, you may be violating certain state and federal antitrust laws. And one of our discoveries was a lawsuit that was lodged the end of this month, I believe February 28th, in the state of Arizona. And this lawsuit was suing RealPage Incorporated plus a number of corporate property managers. I'm going to read here who some of them are. Camden Property Trust in New Jersey, Crow Holdings, Trammell Crow Residential Company, Graystar Management, Widener Property Management. And these were companies that were renting their properties, although they may not be in the state of Arizona. They could be somewhere else in the country. But they were price gouging, according to the state attorney general of the state of Arizona, to the point that they were violating Arizona antitrust laws. Now, I find this extraordinary. Arizona is a really, really conservative state. And this is, this is a pretty radical lawsuit in my view. Rents, of course, in the state of Arizona, and specifically the Attorney General is naming two areas of Arizona, the city of Phoenix and, this was all in Maricopa County, another big city in Arizona that just escaped my memory banks here. Maybe I need to, Tucson. So we're talking about city of Tucson and the city of Phoenix, both in Maricopa County, which is the largest populated county in Arizona. And rental rates had increased in this period that I just talked about from 2020 through, in this case, they went through 2023 and upped it to 40%. But in a 2-year period, rents had increased by 30%. That's market rates. And I think that the same thing probably is happening here in the Central Valley. It's actually happening all over California. Keep in mind, California has, except for a few very rare exceptions, has no rent control. Just a few places in California have it. Some parts of LA County, San Francisco County, which is the city of San Francisco, and some parts of Alameda County have rent control. But that leaves the majority of the state, 7/8 of the state maybe, where there is no rent control. Now, people get confused thinking that, the Tenant Protection Act, which partly went into effect in 2020, and then additions were made to that piece of California legislation, it sounded like there was rent control happening, placing 5% caps on multi-unit complexes in California, but not all of them. Generally, the 5% cap on how much you could raise the rent as a property manager or landlord was for these so-called affordable housing developments, brand new developments, basically. Not just the affordable housing ones, but for the most part, that's what we're building the most of in California, which, in my opinion, is, you find a piece of worthless land and turn it into $10 million, and this is how you do it. So RealPage designs this specialty software, and it doesn't just design software to manipulate what's out there in terms of the going rates for rents. They also have software that's developed for eligibility to live in affordable housing, also to determine rent worthiness of those home seekers and applicants and tenants that are coming to rent these properties in these multi-unit complexes, apartment complexes. So they can do the whole shebang for you. Run credit checks, run background checks, and determine with algorithms whether or not you are credit-worthy or rent-worthy to operate or to rent one of their properties. But this lawsuit isn't about that. This lawsuit is about unfair competition, rent gouging in the state of Arizona, which just blows my mind. Keep in mind, this is a really conservative state. And then we began to discover, Mike and I, that this wasn't just happening in Arizona. This has been happening in some other states, in the state of New Jersey, in Washington, D.C.
I seen they had a lawsuit on them in Texas and Denver.
Yes, and RealPage Incorporated is out of Texas. RealPage was actually is a subsidiary of a private equity group out of Florida. I can't remember who they are. They're not named in this lawsuit. But there is also a federal lawsuit brewing in federal district court in the state of Tennessee, which I think is the Third Circuit. I'm not quite sure. And Department of Justice, United States Department of Justice, has gotten involved with this lawsuit to also go after these guys for antitrust, unfair competition. Remember when we split up, Bell Telephone and all the baby bells back in the day, which would have been back in the late 70s, early 80s, and you had all these different telephone companies where you lived instead of one big giant telephone company. And the same kind of thing going on here, except with rent. So you want to know why you're paying so much rent. Well, what got us involved in this today? I had a call today at our offices at the Fair Housing Council from a tenant in Clovis, California, in Fresno County. And this guy had been renting a house, single-family home, modest single-family home, probably about 50 years old, the house that is. And he had been renting it for 10 years, and all of a sudden, his rent was going to go up $300 from $1,300 a month. And when he first started renting the place, it was $900, I believe, $850 or $900 a month 10 years ago. 3 and 2 house, simple house, and there was no paperwork delivered to him. Basically, the property group, which was a corporate real estate group, texted him and said that his rent was going to go up. And this is kind of interesting. I've been hearing this. Actually, I had two in-place tenants who had talked to our office this morning that were realizing these rent increases, and both of them were seeing rent increases of well more than 10% of what they're paying. There's an existing law in California since 2003 that says that if landlords want to make rent increases, and those rent increases are going to be more than 10% of what you're already paying, then there must be a 60-day notice of the intent to do so in writing. And what we're seeing are these corporations and also, single individual landlords that are using this texting as a way of giving you that notice. Not so sure that counts as written notice. I would argue that there's some deficiency there, but this is what people are getting. So this guy is calling saying, can they do this? And he was invoking the Tenant Protection Act as it's been fashioned to work for this year, for 2023 and 24, where there was that 5% cap, although the 5% cap on rent increases in California doesn't apply to single-family homes. But it does apply to multi-unit apartment complexes. But at any rate, what can I do? I'm not going to be able to pay this. And they're indicating to him their intent is to eventually get it to $2,000 a month, and hopefully by the end of this year, that was their plan. And, hey, there's no way this guy says I can afford the $2,000 a month, and I've been in place here, for 10 years. Well, the marketplace has been manipulated by this kind of software and by these kinds of companies, and certainly RealPage is probably not the only company that's doing this. You look at the background of people that work for these kind of companies, and these are, kind of like the laid off of Wall Street, hedge funders, equity group members, or started their own equity groups and banded out into these different directions. And that certainly has been the case of the principals at RealPage Incorporated. Now, there is also the federal suit that's going on, also an antitrust suit. And that is actually a class action suit of tenants, wherein the same kind of thing. And their argument is This is unfair price fixing, that they manipulated the marketplace. Now, we also discovered that RealPage and its software and corollary products, and you have to buy these products, by the way, housing authorities were using them, and we were trying to determine which housing authorities were using them. Now, keep in mind, a housing authority is the entity that administers Section 8 housing choice programs and vouchers, and public housing. It used to be that that meant that you were never, ever going to pay more than 33% of whatever your income was. And this made rents lower. Well, this is all kind of changing as rents go up for those people that are in public housing, and whatever the value is of that Section 8 housing choice voucher. I know that it's taken groups like ours years of banging on the doors of housing authorities to get them to fashion their programs in such a way that users of the Section 8 housing choice program could live in better housing than what they were choosing, that the voucher would be worth what was out there in the market to purchase or rent. That's taken like years and years, and now that's going to implode with the advent of the kind of software like RealPage has developed. I hope one of those RealPage guys is listening today, and they get mad and call us up so we can talk to them some more. But what that really blows me away, because I had sort of an epiphany about affordable housing this past October. We hosted, as the Fair Housing Council, a training conference for housing providers. We had a lot of topics that we were discussing, including, fair housing best practices and so on and so forth. But we also were disturbed because in the course of various and sundry investigations we do, we had discovered that affordable housing wasn't really affordable for a lot of people. It certainly wasn't affordable for the folks that it was apparently designed for, low to moderate income individuals. Low to moderate income individuals pretty much encompasses all of us, doesn't it? I mean, if you're not low income, you're probably moderate income. And if you're really, really rich and high income, I guess you don't care about this stuff. But certainly if you're working every day and trying to make that paycheck stretch to pay all the things that encompass daily living, a roof over your head, i.e. rent or a mortgage payment, utility bills, and utility companies undoubtedly are using these kinds of algorithms to determine what the market will be, what the market might bear in terms of pricing. So this is what's happening, folks. We've got a real monster unleashed on us. And really what it takes is a way to rein them in through the law. And this is one way to do it, is by suing them in federal or state court. And I think we're going to be seeing lots and lots more of these happening around the country. Back to my epiphany, in October, I had a group of folks that represented developers of affordable housing in the San Joaquin Valley. And finally, after much prodding by myself and Mr. Smith here, there was one person that represented a county that said, you're right, it isn't affordable, really. And affordability and the market price is determined by HUD. HUD, United States Department of Housing and Urban Development, generally providing, they're going to be the folks that provide the funding for, of course, Section 8 and project-based Section 8, public housing, and so on and so forth. And they also, of course, have enforcement obligations in terms of the Fair Housing Act, which is about discriminatory housing. And, I think what we're seeing is that pricing in terms of rent and also in terms of the mortgage market, everybody talks about, oh, California is a real expensive state. And that's true. We have some counties in California that are the most expensive real estate, some of the most expensive real estate in the country. Fresno County has always, in the San Joaquin Valley and those counties, Madera and Merced County and Kings and Tulare counties in the San Joaquin Valley, have always been noted for their more affordable rents. And we're now starting to be neck and neck with a lot of big urban areas and other places in terms of rent pricing. So we're really not that affordable anymore. Lots of people, moved here thinking, it's going to be a lot cheaper to live in a place like Fresno County or Madera County. And, the rug is being pulled out from under these folks.
Can't tell the difference no more. I think what they doing is adjusting to those people. Like if you move here from L.A., they saying, oh, well, they're used to paying this.
Sure, what the market will bear.
They put it there.
Well,
joke's on them.
Well, the joke's on them indeed. But then you've got a company like RealPage that determines what they think, what the market will bear. We hear about artificial intelligence, something that's a machine that it can actually make decisions. This is not a new concept. This goes back to Turing. I remember studying behavior machines back in the those were developed in places like Johns Hopkins University, behavior machines, little simple machines, back in the 50s, who could, kind of make little decisions about whether or not they should run into a wall or not, as somebody let one of them go. And they're probably the forerunners to those, what do you call those, round vacuum cleaners?
The ones that vacuum by themselves.
Yes, they're kind of like those. They're kind of like a little behavior machine, really. And all of this stuff is based on certain mathematical precepts. In this case, algorithms, where you have a bunch of protocols. You do this, you do that, you do this, and here's the result. And I don't know that that's exactly freewheeling or free thinking or actual intelligence, because somebody had to program that somewhere. A real person had to do that. But you can manipulate with this kind of stuff. Now, RealPage has, and before we end this, to be fair here, they have accumulated an awful lot of data about vacancies and pricing and that kind of thing, to write the kind of software that they have, that has really had a bearing on the rental market as we know it in the last 3 years. So this is what's happening, and this is why your rents are at these sky-high prices, and they don't look to go down very quickly. In fact, probably not at all. I do believe that if the federal government doesn't want to address this, or your state government doesn't want to address this, and we have to applaud the state attorney general, Kristen Mays, there in the state of Arizona. I'm just, I'm going to write her a letter tonight, or an email, because it's just unbelievable. It's about time somebody figured out a way to go after these guys. Now, for those of you just tuning in, this is Fair Housing, It's the Law. Myself, MJ Borelli, and
Michael Smith.
We both are with the Fair Housing Council of Central California. If you are being rent gouged, call us. Our number is 559-244-2950. We're going to investigate this and find out if RealPage Incorporated or a like company is behind your horrid, huge rent increases. And we really all should be mad as hell and not want to take it anymore. Now is the time to take action, and you can change this. You can change this with local policy. You could talk to your local elected officials. You need to do something more than, gee, this is terrible. This is all I'm seeing in these, this is election day today. And this is all you're hearing, are the politicians talking about, yeah, it's awful. We have this epidemic of homelessness, and we have, housing at the point where it's unaffordable. Well, we're the consumers here. It's time for us to talk to these guys that we elected. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll talk about the mortgage market next time.